Roots is an acronym for Rising Out of the Shadows. It was founded about 10 years ago. Initially, the shelters in the U District sort of went from church to church over a period of a week. It'd be in 3 different churches. And somewhere a couple years ago before I started there, they had consolidated it down to 7 nights in one shelter, which is in the Roots shelter in the University Temple Methodist Church. What Roots does is the main program of Roots is a shelter for homeless young adults, ages 18 to 25, men and women. Our capacity is 25. We fill up most every night, open 365 days a year. It's just an emergency overnight shelter. It's basically a mat on the floor. You know, you're in at 9, out at 8 a.m. We also run a Friday night meal program for about 150 people, and that's an all ages program. It's called Friday Feast. My boss, Sinan Demirel, founded that about 13 years ago now, and hasn't missed a meal in the over 500 weeks since then. And then our other programs, we try and do sort of civic engagement stuff and building partnerships between different social service agencies, the faith community, the educational community, the nonprofit community, to try and build a full continuum of care in the district and to make sure that everyone's sort of talking to each other and not duplicating effort, and just to try and expand the services available to the homeless people in the district and throughout the area. Last year we turned away people over 1,000 times, so that's a night when we got 25 beds and 30 people show up, so that's 5 people we have to turn away. And every year our turnaway numbers grow. We served 434 different kids last year, and every year that number grows. We serve, 150 meals every Friday, and we're usually pretty full, and we send a lot of food home with people. So it seems to me the need is growing, and that was even before the economy kind of took the latest nosedive that it took. We were seeing a steady growth in need for our services even before this kind of current recession hit. And as much as people want to talk about ending homelessness, it doesn't seem like that's going to happen anytime soon. And so in the meantime, you need services like us so that even just from a standpoint, if you just want to be kind of hard-hearted, you'd probably rather have these people sleeping in the church basement than in your doorway if you're a business owner, The business community in the U District has been really a great supporter of ours. The current head of the Chamber of Commerce was on our board for quite a while. We have a lot of partnerships with businesses, and generally our relationship with the business community is good. And I think that's in part due to the fact that our former board member did a lot of sort of community building in the business community, and we make an effort to talk to our business neighbors, find out what their concerns are, if people are loitering or anything like that, and try and address that to the extent we can. But I think business people understand that, people need a place to go, and you can't really repress this problem into non-existence, so it's better to just deal with it. If you go pretty much by any major college, you will find that because there are young people, that's where homeless young people will gravitate. And in the case of a city like Seattle, if you come out at 16 and get kicked out of your house in Olalla or something, you probably wind up going to the city. And then you're either going to wind up probably on Broadway or in the U District. And I think, at the risk of generalizing a little bit, I think Broadway is known as maybe somewhat tougher neighborhood and with fewer services and less of a kind of a sense of community for people who live on the streets. So folks do gravitate to the district, but they would be somewhere. I mean, they've done these homeless encampment sweeps, and all that's done is just basically push people underground. It's not that they have addressed the problem, it's just they've sort of moved it out of sight. I think Seattle does pretty well as cities go in terms of, and I will say, I've certainly, I guess I'm probably known for being something of a gadfly at City Hall on land use stuff. But I mean, I will say that I think the mayor and the council, perhaps more the council, have their hearts. I mean, the council aren't advocating sweeping people's belongings and throwing them away, so maybe that's a broad statement. But I think in general, we fund services pretty well in this city. Our program is about half funded by the city of Seattle, and the rest is, private grant writing, businesses, individual contributions. And by and large, I think people's hearts are in the right places for the most part. I think this 10-year plan to end homelessness has given people sort of an excuse to try and turn the screws maybe on these services a little bit and say that, oh, well, since we're going to end homelessness, we don't need emergency shelter, and we're just not there yet. I mean, you'd need thousands and thousands of housing units to do that, and there's no money to do that. So in the meantime, yeah, we are sort of a Band-Aid just providing emergency shelter, but it beats the heck out of having people die on the street. I just think that these are perennial problems, timeless problems that have been with mankind, for about as long as there's been mankind, or at least organized little batches of us not living off the land directly. So I don't know, I think it's a combination of permanent housing and low barrier housing, so that I think if you require people to be sober, many of these people will never get into housing. You need the kind of services that really serious case management services and really serious on-site. Many people who are homeless are, as most people are aware, very mentally ill, very substance addicted. A lot of folks were in the foster care system. About a quarter of our guests were in the foster care system at one time or another. And many of them, shuffle through foster care placements and never really learn how to live independently. And, think how you were at 18, Were you ready to live on your own at 18? Really ready? I mean, I did, but fortunately I had mom and dad to fall back on when I screwed up. If you're 18, you have no parents, you never really learned how to, balance a checkbook, or, let alone a whole host of other, more complicated things than that. And you combine that with problems with substance abuse, mental illness. It's not an easy thing to do. I think the main thing is having a lot of supportive housing with services on site to really try and help people move into self-sufficiency and to understand that for some people who are really mentally challenged or have mental health problems, they may never be fully self-sufficient. And you're just going to have to accept that it will always cost money to take care of them. And that, in a society as wealthy as we are, you ought to find the resources to do that. I've just been up and down the Ave for years, and I am always sort of blown away when people say that they don't feel safe on the Ave, because to me the Ave is just not threatening. I just don't find the people I see on the Ave threatening. I guess I've been to dangerous cities, and Seattle is not a dangerous city by any stretch of the imagination compared to, a place like New Orleans or bad parts of LA or whatever. I like the mix of retail on the Ave. I mean, I've sort of always liked that. I like record stores. I like bookstores. I like being able to eat at a different place every day of the month practically, not just the week, And just the energy, the fact that particularly fall is just so fun. You get like this whole new batch of, thousands and thousands of kids, and it's just this whole energy that really surrounds the Ave because you have this mixing of these populations. Yeah, there was a fair amount of activism around the campus in the 80s around things like Students Against U.S. Intervention in El Salvador. I marched with a number of times. There was a big move at the UW campus in the 80s to get the UW to divest from South Africa. A lot of protests on campus over that, and they did eventually, in fact, pull all their assets out of South Africa. I guess there is less activism now. It seems to me that, at the risk of sounding like those kids today old person, it seems to me like they're more careerist on campus. There is less of sort of and there's a lot of people doing social justice activism, and then I think a lot of people are there because they want to earn a real paycheck. And you don't hear much about student marches or anything like that anymore. And even in the 80s and even the 90s, there was a lot of that activity. So I guess, maybe we're in kind of a more conservative, I would say, period now. I think it seems to me, if you read the Daily today, that the campus has gotten a lot more conservative, surprisingly so to me. But, this pendulum swings, and so, it is, what's the expression? It has been ever thus, So, the world just keeps on turning, people keep doing stuff, and I think the U District, the University of Washington isn't going anywhere, and it will always be, and we haven't even touched on the UW. The UW has a huge, huge impact, and it gets at the protest stuff you're talking about too, in that it always will be sort of this intellectual hub and this energy hub for young people who are coming from all over the state, the world, the country, who kind of land here, and it's always going to be like that, and that's always going to be, I think, really kind of the dynamo that drives the U District. And there's a reason they call it the University District, and 40,000 students and another 10,000 faculty, staff, and all that have always had a huge effect on the local life here. And it's a really positive effect.